Golden rule number 5. Do not do all the talking. Give your tired listener a chance. Oh dear, you haven't asked me about my golden discovery. Oh dear, is there still another rule to lay down? I thought we had already filled the list. No, this isn't a new rule. I've just about come to the conclusion that people are charming in proportion as they can rise above the commonplace. Of course, they must observe all our golden rules, but mere observance alone will not make them interesting in conversation. Last night, for example, I was never so utterly bored as when talking with a young lady to whom I had recently been introduced. She was so well-bred that she observed all the golden rules from A to Z, and yet she was tiresome beyond endurance, simply because she had no soul. She was a Philistine of the deepest dye. I must say I'm rather conventional myself, in that I avoid bohemianism, but when faced with a thorough Philistine, I take a bohemian every time. Then I suppose the golden rule in essence should be, cultivate a soul, and if you don't have one, at least assume one. I suppose so. To me, soul stands for one's love of the beautiful, of the ideal. You see, whatever you speak about, you lift out the commonplace. Life seems quite worthwhile when I'm with you. All the inspiring things, books, music, painting, take on new meaning when we talk about them. Last evening, my newly made acquaintance and I discussed those very subjects, but they didn't interest me in the least. Julia Marlowe, whom she had just seen, was to her simply a pretty woman who dressed perfectly. The latest book was something she found a bore, but which she said had to be right because everyone else was reading it. Music? An unknown quantity. What shall we do with Philistines like that? Leave them to their idols. They will not be alone. There are many to keep them company. The trouble with so many people is that they never cultivate admiration for the beautiful. Beautiful pictures, exquisite music, delightful books. They live in a world of materialism. Handsome houses, expensive furnishings. So libraries, or rather their possessions, are valuable not merely for what they contain, but because they are the embodied insignia of wealth. The person of high ideals delights in the beautiful because it brings him into harmony with that perfection for which he strives. In a beautiful painting, he sees the artist reaching beyond what is to portray what should be. In a great literary work, he recognizes the mastery of intellect, the ability to mold words as skillfully as an artisan shapes raw materials. In beautiful music, he feels the soul of the composer, who can make the listener experience all the emotion he once felt under the spell of harmony. And so beautiful things are loved not only for themselves, but for what they represent. For nothing truly beautiful has ever existed without a master creator, a power behind the throne, where the monarch, beauty, is at the beck and call of a giant intellect. If we are to belong to that class who love the beautiful for what it signifies, we must cultivate our souls, that part of us which brings us into rapport with the divine and the universal. We must not be sordid. We must not simply possess. We must aspire. We must cultivate a love for the ideal, for what beauty represents. Yes, and this can be done. In our modern schools, the best in literature, art, and music is being brought to children. The child of today learns to note the subtlety of Handel or Wagner and hears their music. He sees representations of great masterpieces and begins to admire the Madonnas of Raphael or understand the pathos in the paintings of Jean-Francois Millet. This kind of education cannot fail to instill in children a love for the beautiful. To them, the world takes on a rosy tinge, while their minds become storehouses filled with the treasured thoughts of the ages. Nothing in everyday life can remain wholly commonplace. Every small incident, every mood of nature brings with it a deeper suggestion, a moment of insight. You know, you said, "You're expressing exactly what I've always wanted to say, but somehow I could never quite find the words." Possibly that is one reason why I enjoy your company more than that of anyone else, because you say the things I would say if only I could express my thoughts. It is for this reason that we admire an author, because he puts into words what we think, what we feel. I think we should add golden rule number 5 to our list. Do not do all the talking. Give your tired listener an opportunity to speak. Though I must confess, when I'm with you, I'd rather listen talk. I'm half inclined to believe you, for you are certainly perfect as a listener. A golden rule number 6. Do not be continually the hero of your own story, and on the other hand, do not leave your story without a hero. Ships that pass in the night and speak each other in passing, only a signal shown, and a distant voice in the darkness. So, on the ocean of life, we pass and speak to one another. Only a glance, a voice, and then darkness again and silence. And what we call a meeting. I was thinking of those people we meet, those who speak to us in passing, whom we may never encounter again, yet whom we can never forget. That intangible something which makes us wish to become more closely associated with a newly made acquaintance. What is it? It is indefinable. We meet someone at the theater, at the club, at a social gathering, and for many days the memory of those few brief moments lingers, in which we felt like twin spirits moving musically to a well-ordered law. Strange as it may seem, we live in a world full of people, people to the right of us, people to the left, yet only here and there do we find a kindred spirit in whose moral and mental atmosphere we bask as if in the rays of the sun. This something makes us feel that only the element of time is needed to transform a newly formed acquaintance into a friend who will last a lifetime. What is it? A warm hand clasp? A friendly word? And in one brief moment, that mysterious barrier which clouds the soul is cast aside, and in our sky a new star appears, fixed as Polaris in the heavens. When we have an experience of this kind, even if we've exchanged but a few words with our new friend, we feel instinctively that we could spend many hours together and never tire of exchanging thoughts. Yes, but doesn't this presuppose a mind already stored with those richer thoughts we were speaking of in our last conversation? Possibly, in a sense. But first of all, it presupposes harmony, a harmony of tastes, a unity of ideals. This does not mean, of course, that each must agree with the other in all essentials, but that each should have the same broad and intelligent way of looking at the subject under consideration, each respecting the other's opinions. I think, though, that as a foundation for truly harmonious interaction, there must be an elimination of selfishness. No one who is thoroughly selfish can interest anyone but himself. It seems to me that the ideal relationship between friends presupposes, if not the entire elimination of self, at least a sincere effort to rise above it. Not necessarily, however. One of the most tiresome individuals I know is a gentleman who never refers to himself, his aspirations, or his plans, and for this very reason he fails entirely to awaken any interest in his personality. He is the exact opposite of the self-centered person who speaks only of his own interests, yet both, in their extremes, are equally unengaging. The person who exercises discretion will neither avoid all reference to self, nor continually make himself the hero of his own story. It behooves us all to examine ourselves, and if we find that we lean too far in either direction, we should try to correct it. In guiding the course of conversation, the tactful individual will choose topics of mutual interest. People are engaging not merely in proportion to how many personal experiences they share, but by how broadly they show interest in what concerns others. This brings us to another addition to our list. Golden rule number 6. Do not be continually the hero of your own story. On the other hand, do not leave your story without a hero. In other words, it is fatal to dominate a conversation with oneself, but equally fatal to eliminate oneself entirely. The art lies in balance. Self-centeredness is one of the most disagreeable traits a person can have, and anyone who suffers from it to a marked degree should make a conscious effort to overcome it. Someone has said, if we had to choose our burdens, we would not choose suspense. Perhaps that is true of selfishness too, often unnoticed by the one who carries it, yet heavy for those around him. We might add, if we had to choose our faults, we would not choose selfishness. A person may observe all the golden rules we have enumerated, but if he is at heart a selfish person, his conversation will lack that charm which radiates from the whole-souled individual, one whose first thought is to interest, uplift, and entertain others. Let us then cultivate an unselfish spirit, for without it our words will be but as sounding brass and tinkling cymbals, loud but empty of meaning. Here, rule number 7, choose subjects of mutual interest. Vowden, here we are again at one of your charming at-homes, and as usual, I am the only guest. It is truly delightful of you to choose for my visits those evenings when there is no possibility of interruption, and we can discuss our favorite topic undisturbed. If I were not at home on these occasions, we would have very little opportunity to talk about the subjects in which we are unusually interested. It is decidedly paradoxical, is it not, to be at home under such circumstances? It is, to say the least, exceedingly pleasant. Otherwise, how should you be able to continue teaching me that most delightful of arts, the art of conversation?
I'm just selfish enough to revel in being the only diplomat at your salons. What is that line about conversation being like an orchestra, where all the instruments should be in tune but none should dominate? To my thinking, conversation is most delightful when it is unlike an orchestra.
For my part, I prefer those charming duets where the sweet voice of the soprano rises clearly above the mellow hum of the accompaniment. In contrast, conversation in a crowd often resembles an orchestra in chaos, where all the instruments play at once and none can truly be heard. Ah, I see. A conversation in which many take part is not to your liking. As in music, so with friendships, I prefer to follow the individual, to come into harmony with his thoughts and feelings. That trite saying, corporations have no souls, could apply just as well to a group of individuals at a social function, where the bored look on each face betrays the absence of a subject of common interest. The result? Mutual suffering and mutual endurance. Conversation, you see, is only enjoyable when all participants are equally interested in the subject under discussion. And while it is not difficult for two persons to find topics of mutual interest, it is far less easy for several individuals to strike upon one topic in which all are equally engaged. Consequently, there is much greater opportunity for enjoyment in social contexts where only two are gathered together. Yes, I know, no matter how apparently dry a subject may seem to me, it might be of keen interest to someone else. Certainly, only a few evenings since, I noticed at a social function a lady and gentleman deeply engaged for a long time in the discussion of some topic in which each was apparently vitally interested. I learned afterwards that the gentleman was the editor-in-chief of a new dictionary recently compiled, and that the lady was a teacher of English in a college. They were discussing the relative merits of the diacritical markings of the Century Standard and International dictionaries compared with those of old Webster. I should call that an extremely dry subject. Oh, they found it fascinating. They really became excited, not impolitely so, but deeply absorbed in following each other through the maze of half circles and dots, straight lines and curves. That is why people whom we meet, polite and calm people, try to draw us out to define what we are interested in, so as not to hinge the conversation on politics when it should be on potatoes or on poetry. The whole secret of pleasant social conduct lies in the participants finding subjects of mutual interest. Why, I have heard two persons discuss by the hour the feasibility of raising ducks as a means of livelihood, others that of manufacturing a washing machine that would wash and boil clothing at the same time. So, you see, it doesn't matter whether the topic is politics, ducks, poetry, the latest work in science, or infection. Whether it's music or painting, the main point is that the subject shall be of mutual interest to those discussing it. Then we may add another rule to our list, golden rule number 7, choose subjects of mutual interest. Don't discuss politics when you should be talking about poetry, fact instead of friction, science instead of sunset. Yes, and be sure that both are equally interested, or else one or the other will have that bored look to which you referred a short time since. People sometimes appear interested when they are not. Yes, but the keen observer will detect whether the smile extends further than the parted lips. If people would be genuine and less artificial, after a pleasant evening spent in social converse, there would linger with one a memory as pleasing and as refreshing as the sweet fragrance wafted from country clover fields to traveler on the dusty road. In our social intercourse with one another, let us omit all unpleasant topics and choose only those in which both are equally interested. Rule number 8, be a good listener. And here we are again in your bower of roses and carnations. Does it always feel like summer here? For there are always flowers. You wear them too, as another would wear her jewels. She went by Dale and she went by down with a single rose in her hair. This is as I like my flowers, around me and about me. Conservatories have no time for me, for one cannot live in a conservatory. I like my roses where, as I sit and wait, I can inhale their fragrance and see their wondrous beauty. What is more beautiful than a rose? Wouldn't the woman with a rose make a nice title for a poem? You are really lacking in originality. You never would have thought of it in the world if the man with the hoe had not suggested it. Oh, I agree with you that I am not original, and that the title was suggested, but not as you think, by the man with the hoe. Are we wasting valuable time? You know we were going to discuss golden rule number 8, and we haven't even decided what it shall be. Be a good listener. Wasn't it Addison who said that the most skillful flattery was to let a person talk on and be a good listener? But somehow this has such a ring of insincerity. Now I'm sure that I should not wish to be beguiled into thinking that I was entertaining my friend when in reality I was boring him. Yes, a person who observes all the golden rules will not talk on and on. You know there are few persons who can talk on and not bore. They're listeners. Of course, if people were tactful and would observe golden rule number 7, choose topics in which all are interested, it would not be necessary for the listener to feign an interest if he has it not. But what are we going to do when we are in the society of those who did not observe this rule? Sometimes we can enjoy the conversation of others for reasons opposite to what might be expected. For example, a few days ago I was one of several guests at a luncheon, and I was very much amused in noting how subjects which in themselves seemed very prosaic could elicit so much enthusiasm in the discussion. For instance, the guests discussed the making of salads, and much enthusiasm was expended over a mixture of fruit, nuts, and olive oil. The subject was certainly highly relevant, as the very kind of salad in question was in evidence, calling forth enthusiastic comments from all. I suppose you are often amused at the amount of interest shown in trivial subjects. No, I too at times like to relax and talk about subjects that would seem frivolous to many. While much of my time and close attention must necessarily be given to study, for this reason, when there is any diverting influence, I prefer occasionally to forget everything of a serious nature, and, like the bee that goes from flower to sip each its sweetness, I enjoy passing from one subject to another, discussing only lightly each in turn. So you see, whether it is salads or parties, Mrs. Campbell or Paderewski, sure gowns or pleated, these subjects at times may prove interesting and diverting. But when a person is deeply interested in some special study or vocation, I cannot see how he can find much satisfaction in the discussion of topics so very foreign to his specialty. As I have just implied, the specialist finds it necessary to relax. I have in mind a noted physician who spends many of his waking hours, and hours when he should be sleeping, either in his laboratory or with his patients. But immediately when he enters his drawing room to greet a friend, he forgets his work utterly for the time being, and before many minutes have passed, his listener is convulsed with laughter over some new story, the latest acquisition to Dr. Stock. Do you know, I often wonder why people do not cultivate the art of storytelling. It seems to me that if one would entertain one's friends now and then with a good story, that wouldn't enliven what would otherwise be a very dull occasion. Storytellers, good storytellers, are probably born, not made, and yet the person who is not especially gifted in this art may succeed in entertaining his listeners, provided that he has wit enough to remember the point and to couch his language, so that the denouement is not surmised first. Surprise is an important element in the telling of a story. Occasionally I hear a good story, and one that I wish to remember. But I can never trust myself to repeat it, for fear that I shall come up before groans and am missing the point, and that omission would of course be unpardonable. I think you might become a very successful raconteur if you would give some attention to the art in question. And of course the important thing to remember is what are the essentials, to omit all unnecessary details, to keep the listener in suspense, and above all not to miss the point. We cannot all be Charles Lambs nor Sidney Smiths, but we can each have our little store of funny anecdotes from which to draw when the occasion is opportune or the story relevant. Well, I suppose we must decide that one must be a good listener at all hazards, and that one must find something of interest in the conversation of others, even though the subject may be salads, one it should be suffered, for example. Shall we make be a good listener at all hazards golden rule number 8? Yes, I suppose so. But if we could all remember and practice our other golden rules, we should not need to add this one to the list. Let me see whether I can enumerate them. Golden rule number 1. Avoid unnecessary details. 2. Do not ask question number 2 until number 1 has been answered, nor be too curious, nor too disinterested. 3. Do not ask too many questions, nor too few. Do not interrupt another while he is speaking. 4. Do not contradict another, especially when the subject under discussion is of trivial importance. 5. Do not do all the talking. Give your tired listener a chance. 6. Be not continually the hero of your own story, and on the other hand, do not leave your story without a hero. 7. Choose subjects of mutual interest. In our latest edition, Golden Rule number 8, be a good listener. We hope you liked our video. Today, we have shared 4 rules. The next 4 rules will be uploaded tomorrow. We have written a total of 12 rules and will be uploading them in sets of 4. So for today, rules 5, 6, 7, and 8 are done. Rules 9, 10, 11, and 12 will be shared tomorrow. Thanks for watching.